Washington Commanders have just made a trade with the Houston Texans for Laremy Tunsil. Yeah. Laremy Tunsil is going to be the starting left tackle for the Commanders. That obviously will move Brandon Coleman likely inside. It could kick him all the way over to right tackle. We will have plenty of time to go through that. In exchange for Tunsil, there is a quote-unquote draft pick haul. That is the phrasing that I've seen from both Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter. So Laremy Tunsil on his way to Washington. And that's not how we thought we were going to start the show, because literally when the time Russell's show ended, that hadn't happened yet. That happened in the 4 minutes in between our shows. I can also tell you more on the breaking news front. Diana Rossini from The Athletic reporting that former Commander safety Jeremy Chinn is signing with the Raiders. So, man, this is enormous. Let's deal with the Laremy Tunsil thing first. Laremy Tunsil, 2 years ago, and kind of going back the previous couple of years before that, was arguably the best left tackle in all of football. That is not an overstatement. I would still take Trent Williams, but of the short list of guys that were on Trent's level, Laremy Tunsil was one of them. Last year, he was not very good because the Texans' offensive line was an unmitigated disaster in terms of how they were deploying their guys. But Tunsil is 30 years old. He's 6'5", 313 pounds. He has been fairly reliable over the course of his career, both obviously in his play and in his availability. And he has been absolutely exceptional for most of it. We're talking about a guy that going back to 2018, his third year in the league, has graded out on PFF in the green every single year. And he has been the single best pass blocker multiple years by PFF's metric. Again, PFF is what it is. It's not perfect, but it's the best we got. And he has consistently graded in the high 80s or low 90s for the entirety of his career. In fact, last year compared to his previous years, he was actually better against the run. He's graded out at a 74 on PFF against the run. The Commanders are going all in. And that is very, very clear. I am very curious to see what the pick package is here. This is a fairly tackle-weak draft. So my guess is the Commanders looked at this, and here's what I'll say. If they gave up the 29th pick in this draft, and that's all they gave up, I don't mind this deal. If you're telling me that essentially the 29th pick is going to turn into a guy who might be the best left tackle in football for the next 3-4 years, then that is a trade that I am perfectly worth making. Yes, he's going to cost more than a draft pick will, but he's way better, and especially he's way better right now than anyone else you could possibly get at that position. Not to mention, this could kick Brandon Coleman inside. That shores up your left guard spot, or he plays right guard until Sam Cosmi comes back. Or he plays right tackle, and that's probably an upgrade in the long term over Andrew Wiley. But this all just makes your offensive line that much better. And it allows Jayden to do all the things that you want Jayden to do. They eventually need to make sure that they have some level of draft capital to spend. This is a team that wanted to build through the draft, and I'm not holding them to that if they wanted to change plans, but there's a reason that the best teams build through the draft. You have to be able to raise guys in-house. And that said, trading for players is definitely a way you're going to get better players than signing in free agency, because the best players do not get to free agency. And so with Tunsil, you're taking a little bit of a risk. You're buying the dip. But I also don't know just how big of a dip it is based off of the price. Still just refreshing constantly to see what we can...
I got the terms.
The terms. Okay, here we go. All right, I got them too. Diana Rossini, The Athletic. Washington receives Tunsil and a fourth this year. So the Commanders did not have their fourth this year. Now they are back in the fourth round. The problem is they're now out of the third round. So they get a 2025 third. So that's essentially the Jahan Dotson pick. 2025 seventh, they had 2. And now they've given up their 2nd and 4th next year. Whew, that's a lot of picks. It's spread out over 2 years. The 3rd and the 7th is whatever. The 3rd and next year's 2nd and next year's 4th. That hurts a little bit. But I guess you also have time to make other deals. You also have time to trade back. You know, if the Commanders are looking at this draft saying we are going to hopefully trade out of the first round, maybe they've already had discussions with teams saying, hey, we're going to trade out of the first round. We can get a future 2nd back next year. Can you trade from 29 to 38 for this year? Or obviously, you get this year's 2nd. You're going from 29 to 38 and a 2nd next year from a team. That might not be that good. You have to think ahead. And that's one thing that I have definitely learned about how general managers think across sports is nothing happens in a vacuum, right? None of these moves that the Commanders are making, whether it be Javon Kinlaw, whether it be Laremy Tunsil, whether it be any other move that they make, are happening in a vacuum. They are thinking about how they are building a roster and a team in totality. How do we spend our money? How do we spend our draft capital? What timeline are we trying to be good on? And how do we acquire the talent that we want to acquire based off of the market available? Do we have the options in the draft? Do we have the options in free agency? Or do we need to make trades? Because the thing is about draft versus trade specifically, not draft versus free agency. And this is not a full-throated endorsement of this move. I am still very much processing this in real time. This happened as I was preparing to walk into the studio in the 4 minutes between the time that Russell's show ended and my show started. I have watched zero. Actually, the funny thing is Anthony and I were sitting in my prep studio watching Javon Kinlaw tape. I was ready to go with my Javon Kinlaw takes. Obviously, we will get to those as we go, as well as I think Logan's going to check in at 6 o'clock. I'm going to give him some time to watch some of Tunsil on tape. Like, we're going to get to all of it. But on a big picture, the point of draft picks is to get good players. End of story. And whether you actually draft that player, which is essentially a lottery ticket, or you use a draft pick to say, hey, other team, we realize that the player you're going to give us is more expensive than if we had simply used this draft pick, or in this case, draft picks. But we are guaranteeing we're taking a good player. So we are willing to give up the capital and pay that player more. Simply because we are now taking the guessing out of it. Now, does it work every time? Of course not. There are guys that switch systems, switch teams, and it just never works. But at the end of the day, Laremy Tunsil 2 years ago was arguably the best left tackle in football. And so what you're betting on is that no matter how you use these picks that you are giving up, and again, Washington is giving up a 2nd next year, a 4th next year, and then a 3rd and a 7th this year. They get a 4th back in return, as well as left tackle Laremy Tunsil from the Houston Texans. That package of picks would not get more talent on your team over the next couple of years than just simply saying, Laremy Tunsil, you're the talent. And on that level, I get it. Because the Commanders have a window here where Jayden Daniels is going to be making an extremely low amount of money compared to the production that you are getting from him. Again, you got quarterbacks that are signing for basically $60 million a year. And in 2025, Jayden Daniels is going to count $8.57 million against the cap. You have, compared to your production, an extra $51.5 million to spend. You have room to overpay for some guys. Because even if you were to get, let's say a $20 million player and you only get $18 million of production, when you can afford that inefficiency, it's worth it compared to a lot of teams that are paying the quarterback and are like, we have to shop in the $5 million bin and hope we get $7 million of production. Efficiency, sure. But ultimately, you're looking at output. And the Commanders are making some bets on some guys that have had historically great output, that they can regain some of that form and output themselves to one game farther than they did last season, where the Commanders were in the NFC Championship game and are now very clearly trying to get to the Super Bowl.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.